This episode of Couch Potatoes Unite! Is sponsored by Blue Bridge Games. For the games and gifts you won't find anywhere else, head to Grand Rapids, Michigan's friendliest local game store, Blue Bridge Games. Blue Bridge Games carries an extensive line of board games, card games, role-playing tabletop games, Magic the Gathering, and more. Stop into their storefront on East Fulton or shop with them online at bluebridgegames.com.
You say you want to watch a drama. You say you want to watch a comedy. Well, you can watch it with your mama. Or you can watch it with your daddy.
You'll even sit and watch it with your middle schooler. So you can come and talk around a water cooler. We're watching all day and all night.
Couch Potatoes Unite.
Whoa, whoa.
Couch Potatoes Unite.
Whoa, whoa. Couch Potatoes Unite.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the podcast entitled Couch Potatoes Unite! Which is based on a blog of the same name because it's like our version of fantastical fillery. The podcast is the magical land behind the blog. That works, right? I don't know. My name is Kylie and I love TV. If you feel the same, keep listening and or checking out our website, couchpotatoesunite.wordpress.com, as you're bound to find some common ground or something you like. For at Couch Potatoes Unite, we're all about the wonders and the unique long-form storytelling of the small screen. CPU! Hopes you've been following releases of brand new episodes of the podcast on Wednesdays, as well as new blog entries on some Tuesdays, and as always, we have several more new episodes on the way. Because the panels and I live lives behind our podcast, the episodes are published once per week. Subscribe to the website or podcast via iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, via Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, CastBox, Amazon Music, basically wherever you get your podcasts, to stay on top of brand new episodes. Episodes already published discuss a variety of shows around the water cooler, including but not limited to Stranger Things, iZombie, The Good Place, Game of Thrones, Grace and Frankie, Mr. Robot, Altered Carbon, The Orville, Outlander, Westworld, Fuller House, Schitt's Creek, Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., The Crown, Big Little Lies, The Good Doctor, Doctor Who, and The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. We've published several episodes in our Looking Back series covering such diverse shows as The Golden Girls, MASH, Dollhouse, Breaking Bad, and Revenge. Plus, new episodes are in the works, including revisits for The 100, This Is Us, Charmed, Riverdale, the American Horror Story franchise series panel, new name, will talk about Season 1 of American Horror Stories. The DCTU series panel will reflect upon Season 4 of Black Lightning. The Call the Midwife panel will catch up on Seasons 3 and 4, and the Star Trek 50 Plus series will discuss Season 1 of Deep Space Nine. We'll be launching new panels covering Killing Eve, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, American Gods, Grey's Anatomy, Cobra Kai, Peaky Blinders, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, A Discovery of Witches, The Hauntings of Hill House and Bly Manor, Titans, and Umbrella Academy. And because we look back at shows now past, we'll travel through time and experience all sorts of identities with Quantum Leap. We'll cry Bazinga for Big Bang Theory. We'll navigate the witty political satire of Parks and Recreation. We'll become psychos for Psych. We'll go where everybody knows your name with Cheers. We hope you'll be listening when we talk about Frasier. Well, no, that's what she said when we talk about The Office from the UK and the USA. We'll show off our Kung Fu for Chuck, and we'll debate whether saving the cheerleader actually saved the world by looking at all iterations of heroes. By the way, did you know that CPU also from time to time goes live? We've been live from bunkers, comedy shows, Comic-Cons, and game stores. Plus, we are planning more live appearances and other cool stuff, including in whatever we're calling these times, and maybe not right now, but someday. So make sure you like or follow us at our Facebook page, our Twitter at CPU Podcast, our Instagram at Couch Potatoes Unite, or subscribe to our website, YouTube channel, Apple iTunes channel, Stitcher Radio channel, or find us on Google Podcasts, Spotify, CastBox, iHeartRadio, and Amazon Music. In the meantime, if you don't hear your show in this podcast format, fellow panelists and I still write reviews, and we always seek new panelists. So if you have any interest in joining the discussion, say hello by finding us at any of the outlets I've mentioned. At the very least, stop by and leave us a thumbs up, comment, or review. We like feedback, not the kind of feedback offered by the monster at the end of the world, though. Please don't kill first and make snarky remarks about us later. Please? Today's panel is looking back while taking a first look at an American fantasy television series that aired on Sci-Fi and which is based on the 2009 novel of the same name by Lev Grossman. If you aren't already aware, from time to time CPU chooses shows of all types but usually of some fame or notoriety to reminisce about and to consider whether or not they age gracefully like a bureaucratic librarian of the Order, such as Zelda, or don't hold up as well like a deposed High King Margot or a monstrously possessed Elliot. As such, this is another chapter of our Looking Back podcast podcast episodes wherein we review a show that has been gone, either via natural end or cancellation, and for some time. Today, that show is The Magicians, which aired for 5 seasons on Sci-Fi from 2015 to 2020, with a total of 65 episodes in 13 episodes per season. By way of premise, Quentin Coldwater, played by Jason Roth, enrolls at Brakebills University for magical pedagogy to be trained as a magician, where he discovers that the magical world from his favorite childhood book is real and poses a danger to humanity. Meanwhile, the life of his childhood friend Julia, played by Stella Maeve, is derailed when she is denied entry and she searches for magic elsewhere outside of the school. This cult favorite received generally positive reviews throughout its 5 seasons, averaging 91% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes over the course of its run. Critics' remarks lauded The Magician's impressive special effects and creative storytelling as helping to compensate for a derivative premise and occasionally sluggish pace, so the quote goes. Critics also thought the second season had a clearer sense of purpose and extra helpings of cynicism and danger, leading it to the highest level of engagement. The third season was reviewed as surprising and wildly entertaining, with more than enough tricks up its sleeve to keep viewers under its spell. The fourth season divided viewership. Critics noted that a mind-bending fourth season reinvigorated the ensemble with heady twists and spellbinding turns, leavened by the series' signature glib humor, but it started with a 100% Rotten Tomatoes score, which only became more mixed in the second half. The finale was not well received by some fans, who mainly criticized the romanticization of suicidal ideation that was displayed, but also the treatment of marginalized groups. Fortunately, critics and fans felt that the show rallied in its final season with a 5th season that pushes forward without losing where it came from, quote unquote. The Magicians was popularly requested for CPU discussion by some of our resident couch potatoes and couch potatoes adjacent. To wit, 3 familiar CPU voices, a brand new voice, and your very involved moderator were ready to magically convene around the water cooler via their dimensional portal in a tree, of course, to reminisce about The Magicians in one of our looking back episodes, during which we will talk about the finer and less fine points of the series in general. As always, then, it should be noted that all our panelists have viewed the entire series and may discuss sensitive plot points, so for those of you who have not watched The Magicians, listen at your own risk, as there may be major spoilers. At this time, I'd like to introduce the panel. I'm going to remind them how this works, listener, but I'm also going to remind you, if you are not new, and if you are new, welcome. This is how it works. What I'm going to do is ask each of our panelists to tell us who they are by identifying themselves by their first name, just their first name, not your whole life story, just your first name, and then tell us how you came to watch The Magicians. What made you start watching the series? How did you find out about it? What kept you watching? And then we're doing a looking back, so tell us if you really did watch the whole show or if you somehow stopped. And then you get to rate your interest in the show, and because we are doing a looking back session, you get to tell us 2 answers for this along the standard CPU character question that changes with each show we do. Tell us how you felt when you first started watching at the beginning of the series along this scale, and then how you felt by the end. Your answer might be the same, or maybe it will have changed, and that's really what we're trying to find out here today. So, are you ready to do this, panel?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. Vocal affirmations are a plus. This is a podcast. Okay, so how would you rate your interest in The Magicians, both at the beginning and at the end? 2 answers along the standard CPU character question. This one just for The Magicians. It's a little long because there was like 9 main characters, so just bear with me. Did you love everything about it? You needed magic, and you were convinced that it would only be more magical the more you kept watching. In fact, you became something of a zealot, like a follower of Our Lady Underground, otherwise known as the goddess Persephone, determined to watch this show no matter what it threw at you, like a cause or a quest that had to be completed to save the universe, like Julia Wicker. Do you think this show is simply wonderful? Fillory is like a home to you, but the earth parts of the story were also so marvelous and enticing. Sure, there were a few sad chapters, and the fairies turned out to be real assholes, but how can life truly get you down when you're playing with knives and watching this show? Like Fen. Is this show like your best bitch? A narcotic and balm to a weary soul that tires of fighting. You love nothing more than to zone out in the etheric realm while watching this wildly crazy tale of magic, and will punch anyone squarely in the jaw who has unfounded beef with it. like Katie Orloff Diaz? Did you start watching this show later in its airing and found that this show is like one big tasty party? You're here for every moment, no matter how often it places you in personal peril, which is startlingly far too often, like Josh Hoberman. Is this show hedonism at its finest, and you enjoy hedonism very much, except for when it stops being hedonistic and becomes monstrous at the end of the world. In those moments while watching, you cope by going to your happy place for a while and ignoring what you don't like, though in the end, after all those hedonism things, you're not sure how much of the show you liked versus how much of the show you didn't, though you acknowledge that the characters were endearing and evolved in entertaining ways, like Elliot Waugh. Do you love the fillery side of life in this show, and especially the characters of Elliot and Margot, who are a breath of fresh, bleeping air to you? Otherwise, you couldn't give a bleep about most of this show. We can't say the bleeped word. At least that's what you tell yourself and others. You've long squared with the idea that this series is the guiltiest of pleasures for you because you too would like to be High King of Fillery like Margot Hansen. Do you like the show well enough, but not all of it, and some of it you just abhorred or even feared, almost to the point of self-loathing for convincing yourself to finish? Yet you certainly embraced the challenge of grappling with its not-so-good parts and felt somewhat rewarded for your decision to stick with watching the show until the end, like Alice Quinn. Was the show good periodically? What you most enjoyed were the romances and sexy times. Most of it was too batshit crazy for you to be completely behind it, but that didn't stop you from lusting at those you preferred to look at, like William Penny Adeoti or his Reality 23 counterpart. Did you enjoy some of the show, but you felt that its strongest seasons were the earlier ones, in which Fillery was discovered to be real, and when the story was occupied by the cast of earthbound magicians we followed from the beginning? When the magic was lost in season 3, the magic of the show for you started to wane. In fact, you finally gave up altogether at the end of season 4 and stopped watching because of the constant merry-go-round of world-altering apocalypses, and or because, spoiler, you died, like Quentin Coldwater. Or you can't say you love this show much or even like it at all. It was better when you were drunk, and you were drunk most of the time when you watched it. In fact, did you even watch it? You're too hungover to remember. Take that however you want, like Dean Henry Fogg. Who would like to start?
This is Karen. I'll start.
Hi, Karen. I'll start.
My name's Karen, and I did watch all 5 seasons. My husband and I started in sort of late in the show, and then streamed the first 2 or 3 seasons, and then watched 4 and 5 in real time. As far as my perception of how I felt about the series in the beginning, I would put myself somewhere between Quentin Coldwater and Elliot Waugh.
That's a large range, Karen.
I know it is. I loved Fillery and I loved what was going on, but I also had ambivalence toward where some of the story arcs were going in season 3, and by the time I got to 4, I was not sure I was going to even continue to watch it, but I pressed on and did it, and I firmly ended up in the camp of Elliot Waugh.
Okay, fair enough, and we'll parse out your larger range, I'm sure, as this discussion progresses. Welcome back, Karen. Karen, you are on another one of our panels. Which panel are you on?
Outlander.
Outlander! She really likes the fantasy.
Aye.
Welcome back, Karen.
Thanks, Kylie.
I'm Jeremy. I started watching this show randomly. I think my husband made me watch the first episode, and for some reason it just kept reminding me about something, and I couldn't think of what it was, and finally I realized I'd read the books years ago, and ever since then I just sped through them at a voracious pace, watched them all. At the beginning of the show, I think I was a Julia Wicker. I had to watch everything. I reread the books at that time. And at the end of the show, I think I ran the gambit of most of the characters at one point or another, honestly, to end up squarely, probably somewhere right around where Karen ended up with as an Elliot or a Katie or a mixture of the two. Because, I can't ever just pick one.
Okay. Welcome back, Jeremy. We'll have to parse that one out, too, that ending one, because there's a little range between Katie and Elliot. But, Jeremy, you're probably our most involved panelist on this current panel. What are some of the other panels you've been on?
Westworld, Supernatural, Charmed, lots more. I don't even know.
Well, you identified some genre ones, so we know where you're coming from. Welcome back, Jeremy.
This is Ben. I started watching The Magicians. I believe it came up on Netflix back when I think they were only 2 seasons in. and I started watching it because Netflix shows me what I want to watch, and then I watch it. So I didn't have cable at the time, so I wasn't able to keep up on it, but I would pick up the seasons on Amazon and everything as I wanted to. But I definitely started the show more like Fen. I really enjoyed it. I liked seeing where it was going. I liked that type of fantasy, but also it had the grittiness to it. It made it feel very unique among like fantasy type stories. It was like a grown-up Harry Potter almost idea of it, going to magic school. But then by the end of the first episode, you get that crazy scene of like, wait, what is going on in this now? It's not just all magical and happiness. So as the seasons went on, and by the end of it, I definitely firmly found myself more like Quentin Coldwater, relating to him more. I really enjoyed the earlier seasons, and I think it really, after season 3, it really started to decline, and I binge watched them all this past month or so, and I could definitely tell I was losing interest just trying to watch through the last 2 seasons. I did enjoy season 4, but season 5 I thought was very all over the place. So some other podcasts that I've done with you is done Westworld and Altered Carbon. I think those are the 2 that I've done. So I'm making the jump into fantasy from sci-fi. So
it's such a big jump. Welcome back, Ben. And then we have a brand new panelist. Hi.
Hello, my name's Dave.
Hi, Dave.
I started watching The Magicians all the way back in 2015. I actually watched the first episode when it aired. I don't know how, but I like randomly saw an ad for it, and I was like, ooh, this looks interesting. Watched it, fell in love with it. I mean, at the very beginning, I was definitely in the Julia Wicker camp. From the time I watched the episode, by the end of the first season, I had already read all 3 of the books. I went on to, rewatch the series multiple times, not just this time. By the end, more in the Katie camp. I did still love the show. It lost a little bit of appeal upon many rewatches just because there are some valleys there. But it's definitely one of like my comfort shows. Like if I'm bored and just need background noise, I'll throw it on because I'm so familiar. But
all right. Well, clearly, I think we've got the fan on the panel. So welcome, Dave. Welcome to Couch Potatoes Unite for your first discussion. And of course, my name is Kylie. I am both moderating and participating on this panel, as is often the case, because I usually have to watch the shows to, talk about the shows. I mean, it's kind of the thing. But I enjoy doing it. Why did I start watching The Magicians? Well, 2 things. First of all, there was a panel waiting in the wings that wanted to talk about The Magicians. Starting with Jeremy. He was pointing to himself. He wasn't lying. And then, also, this is one of the shows that Netflix tried to push on me, as Netflix does, as Ben raised. I'm definitely a sci-fi fantasy junkie, and they were like, why aren't you watching The Magicians? And I was like, because I don't have cable, Netflix, God. And then they were like, you should just watch The Magicians. No, we didn't have a whole conversation, but it was a recommended show. Like, it kept pushing it on me, like almost like a distributor of narcotics. But we'll get into that in a second. So I watched the show for the podcast. That was the first time I watched it. What kept me watching the podcast? I enjoyed it. I didn't dislike it. But I don't know how I feel. I don't know that I feel elation toward it or any kind of this is going to be a comfort watch for me. There was a lot going on. There are some characters I really love. There are some characters that I never loved, no matter how hard they tried. Alice is going to figure pretty prominently. So when I first started the show, I would say that I was probably a fan because I liked the fillery aspect a lot. I was not a zealot, but I was like, where is this going? I can't believe this storybook is real. And how does it relate to all this magical stuff on Earth? So that part of the mystery was enticing. By the end of the show, even though I don't like her, I probably am... I'm going to be 2. I'm going to be Elliot and Alice. Elliot is my favorite character, and I kind of wrote that one in mind. Also, it was really easy to write his description because he was possessed and stuff. But also, I feel strongly enough about it in some parts of the Alice description that I liked it, but some parts of it I feared or abhorred. But I feel rewarded for having stuck with it to the end. And we'll talk about that. So welcome, panel. Welcome to one of our Looking Back series. This, as you know, podcast listener and or panel, is one of our high-level look backs. So what we do here is kind of, and it's also, by the way, a first look, which means this is the first time the Couch Potatoes Unite is talking about it. It's a recent show, not one that's been out for forever, that people can should have picked up by now, like the Golden Girls. It's one that you actually have to find. Maybe, Netflix has to push it on you. So we are going to do the rating scale, the star rating scale, which is a standard scale that doesn't change. And I'm going to read it. Everybody gets to answer this question, and you can view the rating however you want to. Some people give shows report cards. Some people say this is like the average rating. Whatever you feel like, just don't get too cute with your fractions like one of our panelists named Spencer. Okay, so how would you rate The Magicians overall along this excitingly written scale? Would you say that it's 5 stars? Holy smokes, this is the greatest fantasy show you have ever watched in your entire life. It is riveting. It is magical. It's called The Magicians, after all. You have to watch everything, and you did. 5 stars. Is it 4 stars? It certainly seemed intriguing, and you kept watching, but you saw the pitfalls in the premise as you went. Is it 3 stars? Maybe you watched part of it, a good chunk of it, and you had to keep telling yourself, I'm going to give it one more chance, one more chance. There are things you like, things you don't, and you just wanted to see which things were allowed to flourish, whether you finished it or not. Is it 2 stars? You maybe only watched a small part of it, like the first season or part of a season. Chances are you were mainly bored, but there was some intrigue or fascination that held it together, no matter how unlikely. Or is it 1 star? Pass on this one, guys. It's a snoozer. It's not funny. It's not interesting. It's not remotely magical. It's not even your cup of tea. There's just far too many options on television, especially now, to waste time on this show. 1 star. Who would like to give their star rating?
This is Karen. I'll go first.
Okay, Karen, I'll go first.
I started off feeling a little bit 3 stars, that I'd give it one more try. It started slow for me, but as it progressed and the characters developed, I moved into a 4-star feeling about it. It was intriguing enough to keep me watching, but there were definitely pitfalls in the premise. But I loved the character banter and the character development, and some of I really got into the characters. So I'm pretty firmly in a 4-star category.
I'd also give it 4 stars, and if you'd asked me back when I first started watching, it would have been 5 stars all the way. As I said, I did become a bit of a zealot for the show, but there are definitely the pitfalls, and it is, the characters are, very diverse. They have their ups and downs. I liked that none of them were anything remotely perfect. I mean, Quentin begins the show as the main character, and he's extremely mentally ill the first time we see him is in a mental hospital, which I felt was very unique, for him to be the driving force. I'd give it a solid 4.
Definitely, based on the season overall, I'd give it a solid 3 stars. There were portions of it, especially early on, that I really enjoyed and really liked, and it was enjoyable. I don't know that I would rewatch it again going forward, and I might only recommend certain seasons or up to a certain season for other people. So
I would give it at least 4 stars, just because even though it does have some problems, especially in the 5th season, in my opinion, it's one of the shows that I constantly recommend to people if they're looking for something that's just a little bit out there and not the norm anymore. But I also think they do a pretty good job of tackling some issues, and actually started to do that pretty early on when it wasn't quite so mainstream, to try to tackle those issues on the small screen.
So 4 stars?
Yes.
I would give it 3.5 stars. So I said not too cute with the fractions. I didn't say no fractions at all, Karen. Also, I produced this. So I'm going to give it 3.5 stars. I did find it intriguing, and I did watch the whole show. But there were definitely things I liked and things I didn't. There was probably more things that I liked than those that I didn't. But at the same time, what I liked, I really liked, and what I didn't like, I really didn't like. There wasn't like the shade off the middle. It was more of a, this is either good or it's just not good. So that's why I think I land at 3.5 stars, which is also the rating I will give to a show that I think is decent, that I actually complete and don't feel the need to run away from in the end, which I did not feel at any time watching The Magicians. So that's something. So those are our ratings. Good. Okay.
Not even during the musical episodes?
We're going to talk about those musical episodes, Jeremy, because I got feelings. Okay. Anyway, we are doing a looking back episode. So really what this is about is anything you want to talk about. It's a high-level look. You can talk about things you like, things you don't. We can launch right into those pesky musical episodes. We can talk about something else. It really is, it's not as finely tuned as a water cooler recap or even as in-depth as a retrospective. This is really just, this is the show and what we thought about it, and here are some good and bad points points and what do you think? So who would like to start talking about the magicians and explain your character answers? Some of you with the ranges, of course.
I guess I can go.
Don't be so reluctant about it.
Okay, well, then I'm going to start off with So I think they did a really good job how they ended season 4, but I think season 5 was kind of a hot disaster. It was a little bit of a dumpster fire, and it was all over the place. And I don't know if they kind of just saw the writing on the wall and knew they were going to get canceled, or if it was a conscious choice. I'm pretty sure they knew they were getting canceled.
They did.
And so they had to wrap everything up very quickly, and I think they could have done a better job on that. That's one of my main critiques in the whole show.
So one of the key changes, since we went straight to the latter half of the series, was that Jason Roth, spoiler, asked to leave the show. And what they decided to do creatively was to kill off what was tantamount to their main character of this ensemble cast. Then going into the 5th season without him, even though, as Dave said, he'd been the driver on the story for much of its first 4 seasons, especially given his relationships to the other characters. So I'll start right there. Do you think that his departure was the death knell, or do you think it was a combination of things, something else?
I think they did a really good job with his death, but I think it was a combination of other aspects that made it not great in the 5th season.
So for the 5th season, it is very up and down. I remember really enjoying the first couple episodes because a lot of times shows will kill off a character and then not really give you that grieving process, where they killed off Quentin at the end of season 4, and then you kind of just expect to jump into a new adventure. But the next 2 episodes, they're really like digging into these characters having this emotional fallout from his death, which I really liked. But again, season 5 did kind of fall off, and I think it was really just them trying to find their way again without him there. And also, trying to tie in aspects from the book that they hadn't touched on, which gets tricky without Quentin, who's, maybe this is a spoiler, but he doesn't die in the books.
Spoiler!
So it's something that I think that they were probably struggling with in the writer's room, and probably just trying to piece everything back together without that kind of focus point.
And talking about the books from it, I could tell, especially first season, very heavily pulled from the book. And then they started to kind of just cherry pick pieces of the books after that, until, like you said, they got to the 5th season and said, oh, we didn't touch on any of this stuff. And also we want to do all these other random things. So what if we just throw it all in there and call it good? That's really what season 5 really turned into, is what plot point. It very much turned into what's the plot point of the day, because they'd say like, oh, we have this new thing that we're worried about, and you're like, okay, there's the thing for the season, and the very next episode they'd solve it, and it'd be like, okay, so what's the season about? Yeah. I think one of my favorite things is they hyped up, what was it, the couple in season 5 was this huge magical couple that were trying to do, and it was just like the most let down thing ever. They were just, they're a couple magicians and they want to be parents or something. I don't know. Okay, cool. Exactly. I thought they were much worse, but no, they were just weird. Cool. That wasn't needed.
Marina was worse.
Yeah.
Marina's scary.
I really liked Marina, actually. She's one of my favorite characters in the whole series.
I can see why. She's very dynamic.
It's funny because apparently
I especially liked her in season 5, honestly.
It's funny because I guess when they were first casting that part, they wanted to get like an older figure so that Julia would have like her Dean Fogg, and wound up going with a younger actress because it just blew them away and just opened up all these different possibilities for them going forward.
She was an amazing character. She grew. She had so many different story arcs, but she was always changing in some way. And I think it was Ben said in the 5th season, she really kind of came into her own and turned into a really interesting character in the 5th season.
And I think a lot of that was because she, along with Penny, we don't end the show with the original version of them that we started with. We wind up with the alternate universe version.
Yeah.
So they're the same, but they're different. And so we don't really know everything that she's been through. So when you really get to see a lot of her, she comes out very different than the Marina you're used to.
So let's talk about the alternate universe situation. So what we learn is that, and this is in the first or maybe second season, we learn that they've gone through 40 iterations of trying to defeat the Beast, which is Martin Chapman, We find out that the author of the Fillory books was a pedophile and sexually abused his own children, who actually brought back Tales of Fillory because they found a way in. And the one who took it the worst, or was most traumatized, or maybe was most victimized, was Martin, and he becomes the Beast throughout the series. And in the first season, definitely, but he has reverberations throughout all 5 seasons. The magicians that we meet are trying to defeat him. And so, as we're going through all of these learnings, we figure out that these alternate realities have blossomed, because in 39 other iterations they failed to defeat the Beast. It was only the 40th time. But then Dean Fogg remembers all of the other realities, number one. And number two, the different versions of the characters come in and out, but particularly, probably the first time we see that is Penny, who, by the way, is the man candy on the show. I like to look at him. But he ends up in the underworld and leading the underworld almost, kind of, and his alternate version from Reality 23 becomes the main Penny, which becomes an interesting dynamic, not only in a romantic sense, because the other Penny was with Katie, and this Penny apparently was with Julia in the other reality, and wants to be with Julia in this reality, but then he's got different responses to the normal stimuli that would have ticked Penny off in previous seasons. We also find out that these magicians all have different disciplines, and I think it's important to mention that Penny's is probably the most interesting, because he's the traveler, and he, bamfs them to all different places, including Fillory, and throughout all different times. So, tell me what you thought about that particular plot development, because I got my thoughts.
About the timeline development? The different timelines? Or
Different
about
timelines,
travel?
replacement of pennies, replacement of marinas.
I love the different timelines, especially because I instantly picked up the books and started running with them. For some reason, in my head, I just kind of connected that the books are one timeline and the show is another, because they're such different things. They're such depictions of the events of the story. So the different timelines for me were really helpful. And I was actually just talking about this. Penny specifically, he's such a different character from the original Penny that we meet to Penny 23. And I try to figure out which one I like better, because Penny 23 is kind of a nicer, easier to get along with version. But I do like the snippy narcissism and wittiness that is the original Penny that we got. And so I thought personally that it was a really fun thing and a really easy way to tie different things together.
I thought they started to rely, maybe that's in the latter seasons, they started to really tie in and rely a lot on that, alternate timeline wizardry and whatnot. And they started to get a little bit too reliant on that. We'll just go to another timeline to do this thing, and we'll do it. Then there's other things happen in this timeline. And I did enjoy, I did, I guess, enjoy having the new Marina and Penny, but I liked how Marina's story kind of ended in the main timeline. It felt more real. It felt like they just wrote her back in because the actress did do a great job being that role and everything. And I did like the original Penny more than the timeline 23 Penny. I enjoyed his witticisms and snarkiness, especially between him and Quentin, where you could tell that he did care. He just also was very straightforward and didn't sugarcoat things, and I enjoyed that. Yes. He was more upset that he cared than and couldn't stop.
One of my favorite timeline loops, though, was the episode where Elliot and Quentin end up going into a different timeline and working on the mosaic for their entire lifetimes. I thought that was an interesting use of the timeline logic to key back into why Jane found it completed when she came to visit, and in their future relationships together, the interactions between the two characters. I liked that episode a lot.
That's probably my favorite episode of this series.
It's one of my favorite too. I think there was something very heartfelt about it. And it isn't to say that there weren't moments of heart in other episodes, but I felt like this episode really, really honed in on the dynamic of You know, these characters do ultimately love each other in their own weird and dysfunctional ways, but probably, aside from Elliot and Margot, the one you could count on as far as the most genuine love was between Elliot and Quentin. And I think it's what both of them needed from the backstories that you learned about each of them. And it also informed how they evolved throughout the course of season 4, which is kind of when that happens. So, you know, I really did enjoy that one as well. And it gave them story to work off of, because Elliot harbored real romantic feelings for Quentin, and Quentin did too, you find out, for Elliot at some point. So just based on that chemistry, which is kind of fun. So I like the fact that the show did adapt on certain things. Like, oh, this is a pivot we didn't consider. Let's follow this trail. But it didn't always end as successfully as it did from that episode.
Yeah, for sure. I think that also is one of my favorite episodes. Like you said, those characters, they so desperately need, because they're such broken characters at their core. Like, they come from such traumatic backgrounds, and they find this magic, and it's great and it's powerful, but it can't fix everything. And so they really need that from each other, and they get to experience it. And, you know, they have that line that they use a couple times after that, who gets proof of concept like that, like who gets to understand that they really truly do love and care about each other that deeply.
Proof of concept. That's what Quentin says to Elliot.
Proof of concept. And I think, too, it also shows that any two people who spend a lifetime together will grow together in a way that transcends everything. When you spend 70 years of your life with another person, regardless of your sexual orientation, you love that person. You learn to love that person and trust them and count on them in ways that they have not experienced in the world up to that point. And it's just kind of a very tender look back that happens in that episodes, and it's in season 3, but it's just very, and then they relate back to it in season 4 and season 5 a couple of times, just with little Easter eggs. But it's very cool the way they relate to it.
I would like to talk about the characters for a little bit, because I have many thoughts. So I really love Elliot. Elliot became my favorite. Now I know that it seems to be, when I kind of posted that I had watched this show on my social medias, there was definitely a pro-Margot contingent. And I find her delightful. She's very, profane and whatever. But I really liked Elliot because he, I felt, had the most visible and most dramatic evolution over the course of the show, where it was all forward progress. It wasn't like 2 steps forward, 5 steps back, like an Alice, for example, which we'll talk about in a second. And he also was just so endearing. Like, he wanted to have a good time, but he was so complicated, and he knew that was only a small band-aid for the stuff that he had to grapple with. And he would start by running away, and then he would become very self-aware of the fact that he was running away, and then he would force himself to find the courage, even if it was just to help his friends, which I think is very, very endearing, not to mention the fact that he had some of the best one-liners. And I don't know why he called Margot Bambi, but it stuck, and so that was fun. I detested with every ounce of my being from moment 1, and it never changed, Alice. I don't understand why anybody loved her. I do not like her voice, and I know that's not how Olivia Dudley really talks. I did not care about her woe is me backstory of the rich magician-y parents.
The privileged backstory?
Yeah. And poor neglected Alice, who ends up being the Hermione of her class. Like, I was not ever into her. And they focused a lot on
What about her little growl she does all the time? Every time she did that little growl thing, oh my god, I wanted to smack her.
I wanted to smack her whether she was growling or not. I really wanted her to not be there.
I cheered when the couple cut off her fingers.
Aww.
That's far.
Yeah.
That's harsh.
That's harsh.
It just made her a better magician, that's all.
I guess.
One-handed prodded.
I didn't detest Alice, but she definitely wasn't, one of my favorite characters. She, more than anyone else, I think, suffered from not having a whole lot of source material to work with. The writers, it just didn't seem like they knew what to do with her because she's such a huge part of the initial story, and then she's essentially gone for 90% of what remains. And they really just kind of forced her in there. And while you wanted to keep that dynamic, and she did have some really, really good scenes, I thought I really enjoyed in that season finale for season 4 when her and Quentin are finally, they're deciding they're going to try again. And he's like, okay, I'm gonna go. I want you to be safe. And she has that moment where it's like, no, we're best when we're together. We've done the self-sacrificing thing. Why don't we try to do this together as equals? I felt like that was a really good moment, but she did have the most up and down, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back kind of weird story.
The whole concept of her, I'm the fearful Alice that talks myself out of stuff versus I'm the confident, arrogant Alice who's a know-it-all motif.
The Prism Alice's?
Yes, I was just, I did not care.
I wanted to be like, pick one or the other. Don't go back together with yourself.
Right, exactly.
Because you're toxic to yourself.
Might have been better off if she'd picked one or the other.
Truthfully. And yeah, that whole Nephim or Nephid or whatever it's called storyline.
Niffin.
Okay.
Niffin.
There you go, that word. Was pretty much Dark Willow from Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Oh, 100%.
So, no offense to the actress, I'm sure she did the best with what she was given, but I just did not. The show repeatedly asked me to sympathize with a character that I could never sympathize with, and it was a struggle. And then when she was given screen time, I was like, no, go back to Elliot or Margot.
And my 2 favorite characters are Elliot and Margot. I love the 2 of them so much. Margot actually grows so completely into a huge, omnipresent human being over the course of the 5 seasons. She starts from just being an add-on to Elliot, just sort of an afterthought, into being High King Margot. She has a great story arc. And I love Elliot all the way through. I just do. I love Elliot's vulnerability, his cowardice, his bravery, his idiocy, everything except the monster. But, he didn't have anything to do with that. It just happened. But I like the Elliot character the most.
I was just going to say the character that I wanted to see more of for some reason was Lipson.
Lipson?
Oh. The doctor.
Yeah.
Dr.
Lipson. Yeah.
The
little tiny glimpses we saw into her character were just like a sneak peek into a story that could be really, really good.
The woman who was the blue fairy on Once Upon a Time?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Yeah, all right, yeah, okay.
When she talks about she was a drug addict at one point or something, and it just casually mentions it, and you're like, wait a minute, you're a professor at Break Bills, and you're talking about being a drug addict?
Oh, and an ER physician.
Yeah.
All the crazy things.
She was a physician. Yeah, she had all sorts of... I'm blanking on her name right now, but the librarian.
Zelda.
When she talks about being in the etheric realm.
Yeah, Zelda.
She's like, I spent 3 years in the etheric realm, and I lived on the streets, and...
Yeah, she had a very unique, you just got tidbits here and there, but she also could have made for her own very in-depth story.
Speaking of which, they never did really wrap up the storyline with her daughter, did they?
No.
Well, she gets, when she's trying to escape the library, she kind of got trapped in that in-between, and they tried to pull her back. Yeah, that's when we had the dual Alice's, but she never, after that, she just kind of...
They tried to do the whole thing where you saw her in the mirrors, and then nothing came of that, and I thought it was just kind of like...
We
should have done
shifted
something
to
really
Alice
cool
with
with that.
Yeah, they got her. Yeah, they got her out of the mirror. Her name is Harriet. The character's name is Harriet. She's played by Marlee Matlin, who has a long film career. Which I was like, wow, Marlee Matlin's on this sci-fi show. That's heavy. She was nominated for an Oscar, or maybe even won one. But that's okay. Yeah, they got her out of the mirror realm, but that basically was it. She said goodbye to Zelda. She was like, I gotta go do some things, Mom. And Zelda was like, oh, but you could stay with me, and you could work for the library again. She's like, no, I really can't, and you gotta take care of Everett, the leader of the library who was trying to become a god. And then once Harriet left, she never came back. So.
Yeah, it just sort of dropped.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the characters I enjoyed most were the little side characters or the add-on characters, like Josh Hoberman. I loved that actor and that character and everything. And
By the way, he is played by Trevor Einhorn, and when I was preparing these talking points, I learned that he was the young Frederick Crane on Frasier. I did not recognize this dude. And he did end up becoming one of my favorite characters because I think a lot of the Margot advancement came from...
Happens because of him.
Correct. And how they interact with each other. They're so adorable.
Aren't they?
I think one of my favorite episodes with him was when they end up in, I think it was in season 3 when they're trying to find the keys, and he's in like the crazy party realm where everyone has to be happy all the time and everything, and he tells them, you know, like, you guys didn't even care. You started me on, you know, asked me about this quest and then just left me, except for Julia, and she was the only one that tried to reach out and no one else did. And I liked that as like the whole call to like these main characters with these side characters, and they just kind of leave them behind. So, and then after that, they never left him behind. So
That's true. But you know, I was talking with Jeremy about this because I was giving him regular updates about, well, I'm here on the Magicians and here on the Magicians. And I totally missed when he was somehow made a lycanthrope or a werewolf. And then all of a sudden he started talking about it, and I was like, when did this happen?
Actually, from what I understand, the first time we meet him, he already knows he's a lycanthrope.
I don't remember if we know, or it's in like one of the episodes when they have Quentin locked up because he has Alice in him as a Niffin, and
Josh is in
the other cell and is just like, it's lycanthropy, whatever.
Yeah.
And then later on becomes a major
He's
plot
in a
point.
cell. Because
I feel like that's the stereotypical, like, he made this one-off line, and the writer's just like, no, we're going with that. We're going to use that for the rest of this show.
Yeah, because, I mean, Josh definitely, he became one of my favorites. For me, as far as, like, favorites, I have a really hard time separating Elliot, Julia, and then Quentin, because he was the character that like I identified with very early on. But as far as the side characters, the characters that get added on, Josh, you know, the first time you see him, he's a coward. He's hiding out in the Netherlands. Like his whole class got decimated. His girlfriend or pseudo girlfriend at the time is imprisoned and being tortured, and he's growing magic carrots. Like, he's just kind of off doing his own thing, but he does grow so much. And I totally believe that at that point, he's probably already a werewolf because he makes comments about how they had their dalliances when they first got to Fillory, and they all did their own thing. And so maybe he was then, and he knew.
He talks about I think it's in season 4, the werewolf, the lady who gave him lycanthropy.
Oh, that's right. He does.
Professor.
Yeah, because the quickening, she slept with him to pass it on, so that way she didn't have to deal with it. And he was like, "What? You knew?"
Yeah, because either he has to pass it on or kill someone.
Yeah, and he was. I liked his struggle about it of like, I can't give this to anybody, and I can't kill, and all that stuff. So
until Margot just kind of like,
so Margot's like, screw it.
Yeah.
Or screw you.
One for the team.
Which at first felt a little reminiscent of Oz on Buffy, but when they did take him down that road of Margot's going to do a deed for him and be a good citizen, and then they're going to develop from there, I thought that was novel enough that I totally lost that comparison and suspended disbelief, because I do enjoy him so much. He was a lot of comic relief, and he also was very genuine. Like, I remember, I think this is season 5 when he ends up in the underworld with the kid, because it's the Takers or whatever, and I just loved that episode, that little sidebar with him, because it really gave him an opportunity to show that character all by himself, not relating off of the others, which is what he had been doing all the way up until the point. And I just enjoyed him so much because he is very sweet and he is very caring and he does like his drugs and he is very funny. But in the end, he's a whole person, and that's, I think, what makes that combination with Margot in the end so winning, is because they're both whole people that choose, despite their differences, to be together.
I think the show as a whole did a really good job as it grew to point out those smaller characters. Like, we do get that whole episode where we see Penny, the original Penny, in the underworld, and he's directing this guy look at all these other characters, because he's like, oh, well, Quentin's the main character and blah, blah. He makes, a very meta comment about him being, him identifying because he's the cishet white guy. But then he forces him to focus on Fen and on Zelda and on Josh and all these other characters, and it really rounds out, that these are real, like they're supposed to be real people. They're fully fleshed out characters.
I really came to enjoy Zelda. I know the library was kind of the big meanie in the background, the bureaucrat that was, dogmatically bureaucratic and never going to be anything else. But as she kept appearing, I was like, this character is fascinating. And she had a very strange little affect where she would hold her hands out like this with her cat's eye glasses and her victory waves. And I was just like, okay, she's really, really interesting. And I wish, actually, that Season 5 had spent more time on the Order and the library itself than on this whole Moon, couple, takers, Dark King, played by Robin Hood from Once Upon a Time. They're clearly up in Vancouver.
Too much.
Did you know he also played Sir Effingham the pig?
I did not know that.
He was! He was the pig!
Well, there's
I looked it up.
Fair enough.
I loved how they made the pig a chauvinistic pig.
He was very sexist.
It was pretty funny.
Nobody wanted to help him. And
Because
then
he was misogynist to Julia.
Oh,
until he realized he didn't have any good options, especially Todd.
After
so then
Todd.
he came back to Julia.
Oh, Todd.
Todd.
poor Todd. Oh,
He was just kind of the resident punching bag.
Yeah, he was.
Todd was the resident punching bag, and then we have the unfortunately named Hyman, the resident pervert ghost.
Yeah.
Pervert, yes.
Yeah, I could have done without him.
Yeah, me too. I mean, he had a purpose in the end.
It was interesting what they did with him at the end, though.
Yeah, that's
It
what
was. He definitely had a purpose. He was a bit much.
He was a bit much, and he was very late stage entry. So if they hadn't have given him that purpose in season 5 and the craziness of season 5, I don't think I would have come around on him at all.
Yeah.
And also, he needs a nickname that isn't unfortunately named.
Yeah.
He can be Jaime.
Okay, that's okay. We'll go with that. So let's talk about those musical episodes. I have feelings.
Tell me what your feelings are, Kylie.
Well, first I want to start by saying that one of the creators of the show is Sarah Gamble. She was one of the head writers on Supernatural and also ran that show for its 2 worst seasons. The 6th and the 7th. Now, no disrespect to Sarah, the scripts she wrote were fine. The show running with Soulless Sam and the Leviathan is constant fodder for our discussions on the Supernatural panel.
They're not good.
They're not good. And so it was her idea. She decided to introduce these musical episodes. I did all this because I was like, why? I literally looked up on Google, why does The Magicians have so many musical episodes? Other genre shows or shows in general just stick to 1, maybe 2. This one has 1 per season, at least, from season 2, and sometimes random interludes. So, and it's the Les Mis one was cheeky. It was interesting. I was like, okay, they're going to place. Elliot's the lead singer, so I can kind of buy that. We're working with it. But then it just kept going. And not well.
The desert one.
The desert one with
so
the 80s
weird.
power ballads. Now, I will say that Elliot's dance to the Pretenders song, what's that called? I forget now. No.
Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, that one. I thought that was like wacky LSD kind of fun. But all the rest of it was nuts.
So, you do know that almost no one in the cast has any musical experience.
Yeah, I looked that up too.
Actually, Hale Appleman is musical
and that's
theater.
why they make these episodes.
And Jade also is musical, but yes, most of the others did not. So you have 2 very strong musically talented people.
And you can tell.
You can tell.
I
loved it, though. Those are some of my favorite episodes.
So
I vehemently disagree, although one moment that I loved was when Margot, so Summer Bishel is clearly not a singer. So at one point she's singing a song and then Katie jumps in with her powerhouse voice and she's like, show up.
makes her comment about inadequacy.
Exactly. So those moments were fun. Continue.
Yeah. The musicals were funny.
Yeah, Be the Josh, where they all start doing the Queen song. That was pretty funny, too.
I did think, so the musicals, they had only a show like The Magicians could pull off having that many musical numbers and not have the fan just completely walk away. But I did, one of them, to me, the one right after Quentin passes, and he's trying to figure out, he's like, did I sacrifice myself for my friends, or did I just finally find a way to kill myself? And then he gets to see them gathered around the fire having this heartbreaking moment, and they do, break out into song. It's very, touching and kind of a fitting send-off for him. It's one of my favorite moments in the show.
It's episode 13 of season 4, and they all sing "Take on Me."
Yes, by Aha.
It is pretty amazing.
I will grant you that. That was actually one of the popular adaptations that I was okay with, because it felt right in the moment, and they did a good job with it.
Yeah.
But sometimes they just didn't do a good job, Karen.
Yeah.
I just thought it was fun.
The one in
interesting, wild, wacky.
The one in season 5 was really bizarre when they're in the hotel.
Whenever they had the bursts of emotions and everything.
Yeah.
That's the worst one.
I want to be sedated. Yeah.
That is the worst one.
I think we all might have needed to be sedated for that.
Yes, we did. So I'm going to share on a personal level that I had just gone through surgery, and it was a surgery where they gave me oxycodone for painkiller. And I think it was the perfect accompaniment, the perfect aperitif, if you will, for watching this show. Because those moments were okay, less of a thing. But no, the I want to be sedated was probably a low point for me. Because I was not sedated, and I was like, I do want to be sedated myself.
Thinking about that
actually,
episode,
was it the same episode Elliot and Alice are singing "Don't Give Up" from Kate Bush?
Yes, they sang that one.
And that one was awkward. I will give you that. That one was hard to watch.
From that episode, unfortunately, the only thing, it's one of the images that sticked out in my head of the show, which is so disappointing because I love the show. But it's Elliot and Alice, awkwardly hunched over, swaying back and forth in the doorway, singing while everyone else is running towards them. It was just such a bad look all around. But unfortunately, it's stuck there. It's permanently embedded right here.
You are right. That was not well directed. Now, I think they were trying to extend the Alice and Elliot bonding over Quentin, which I get. Yeah. But I felt like the moment of them tossing the letter into the pit that went to the underworld was good enough. And they didn't need to keep going.
I love that dynamic for them in that episode specifically, when he finally comes forward with, we lived this whole life together. I'm grieving just like you're grieving. And she embraces him for it. She doesn't shy away from it. She has that moment of I loved Quentin and everything that he was, not just who he was with me. But they definitely could have left their bonding there.
That's, I think, when the show is at its best, is the dynamics, the interpersonal dynamics between all of the characters. They gave dimensions to most of the pairings. Maybe a little less so between, say, a Margot and a Katie, because they might have exploded by the end if they gave them too much together. And I really think they worked hard to pay off that evolution, which is something I ultimately appreciate about the show in the end, because I think that's what gave it a nice finish, a nice send-off. But some of it was just really, really rocky.
He's a nice way to put some of the art.
Yes.
What did everyone think of the finale?
I liked it. It was madness in a sense. It was like an extension of the madness that you'd already experienced the first 12 episodes of the season, the last season. But they found a way, although albeit kind of rushed, they found a way to stitch everything together in a way that left me feeling at least somewhat satisfied in the end. I didn't hate it, but I think that everything leading up to it was so rough that it was
Yeah.
asking a lot for the finale to kind of overcompensate for that.
Yeah.
I think my response was, "Oh, thank God it's done."
Ben had strong feelings.
That's fair. I really appreciated that the finale was kind of a callback to the ending for the books, because the book ends with Quentin creating a new world. Quentin and friends creating a new world, and so to have them still explore that even without him was a nice callback for people that had read the books and done, had the other outside attachments to it.
That's good. I haven't read the books. I always wondered if there was something in that related back to the books for those who had read the books. It's good to know.
The only problem I had with the ending of the series finale was that I feel season 4, they did such a good job at the end of season 4 that I thought season 5 was kind of overshadowed by it.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Season 4's ending probably the best one. I feel like the only parts from season 5 to me that were super necessary was them dealing with that fallout. That was
the loss of Quentin.
Yes.
Loss of Quentin.
Yeah. If
He
we had just
definitely felt like the glue that kind of held a lot of those characters together, or was one of the binding agents of them. He was kind of the one that knew everybody or had some sort of connection to them. The others had some connections, but not to like everyone. So he was like that central figure, and when he was gone, it kind of felt like they were forcing some things to keep the other characters together. So
yeah, it kind of felt like they were friends that were on the verge of drifting apart. They were trying to force each other into their lives still, but they were really kind of destined to go their separate ways.
I have complicated feelings about the season 4 finale, mainly because I did not love season 4. I did not like the monster at the end of the world piece. I thought the key quest that led into it was interesting, but that was season 3 mainly. I struggled with the monster at the end of the world because I felt like they tried to flesh it out a little bit. I don't think they knew really what they wanted to do with it other than to make him like the big bad. And it was sad to not have Elliot as much, and you just have like this perversion of Elliot that is being possessed. And so the finale of season 4, I'm glad that it happened and tied that up, and it was really touching and beautiful, and they gave Elliot a save and Quentin a chance to move on in a satisfying way. They didn't just summarily kill off the character and say peace out Jason, thanks for playing. But at the same time, they didn't capitalize on everything they set up in that finale. They just went 10 different directions, some of which were tied, some of which weren't. And I just think there was a lot of potential that they didn't really work through. So
I have to agree.
Yeah.
I think I got to the end of season 3, and when the library like took over the magic that they had freed and restored to the world, and then they were apparently different people, and then the beast was free. That really, just that jump from season 3 to 4, I did not pick it back up until I was reminded I was doing a podcast on it and I needed to watch them. So I binged through the first 3 seasons, still enjoyed them, overall enjoyed them. There were definitely, I think like Kylie said, there's some peaks and valleys in them in the enjoyment, but I did find I did enjoy season 4, but they really started to do a lot of hand-wavy magic things, which it's a show about magic, I get, but compared to the first few seasons where it was magic, but there was this like almost like a hard science to it in a way. It's more like the hard studies. They had to study very hard on it, and they started to get more of the fantastical, let's fix this problem by just waving our hands and saying magic. Let's not actually put any thought or decisions into, or world building into why it is, like with the beast. It seemed like a very good concept, and then I think like Kylie said, they didn't know what they wanted to do with it, just that it was there. Something that I thought was kind of interesting with the beast that they didn't capitalize on was they kind of seemed to be showing that it was getting feelings and starting to enjoy humanity, and I think it would have been more of a better payoff if it instead the beast turned against its own sister to stop her from destroying everything, and that's kind of what they seem to be leading up to. But then they just kind of said, never mind, forget it. We'll just capture him, and then we'll throw him into the Space in Between Worlds. Yeah, that's what we'll do.
To be fair,
Oh, the monster.
Yeah, the
Yes.
monster.
Yeah, the monster.
Sorry, not the beast, the
Yeah.
monster.
To be fair, instead of sister, it was brother because spoiler, the Dark King was the Beast's / Martin's brother. And also, Alice, you may have blocked this out, but Alice was still doing complex math for her spells. Now, she was the only one, and she's, so lovable that you probably were like, what's she doing? I don't know. But they did still have that
I think they
piece.
only did that because that was her whole thing, is that she was able to do the complex math. Everyone else
That
would just
was
be
her
like,
fault.
we're really good at it now, and hedge witches are really good at getting by on very little, so that's what they'll do. And I was like, but they did like parlor tricks when they did that, so I don't know what you're doing.
That was one of the not funniest, but one of the weirdest disconnects is at the beginning of the show, they are all set up like even the characters that aren't excelling in school are these like hyper intelligent kind of characters. But as the show goes on, it really just like besides Quentin, they didn't give Alice another thing, so they just left her with all the brains. It took them away from everybody else. It felt like.
That's true. Did you have a favorite season or a least favorite season? I can tell you mine. My first favorite season was the first season. And my last favorite season was the last season. It kind of was one, and then one went down pretty far, and two just because there was too much focus on Nif and Alice. It went back up real straight with the magic is gone and we need to find the 7 keys. And then 4 was a little bit of a mix for me between the monster and whatever else was going on. And then 5 was just a hot mess.
I'm going to be boring and agree with that assessment because season 1 was definitely my favorite, and season 5 was such a mixed bag that it was kind of hard to get on board with. I felt like it started off really strong and then got super weird and then ended in as satisfying a way as they could have for what they were working with at that time. But yeah, I mean, from 1, then 3 is my second favorite, with the exception of like I loved Quentin's send off, which elevates 4 a little bit, but like 2 and 4 are like the same, and then is.
I cop to that completely. I like that.
I have to kind of agree. My least favorite is number 5. I'll agree with everybody there. I thought 1 took so long to develop. 2 and 3 are probably my most favorite, with then 4 equaling 1. I liked the development of the characters and the storyline in 2 and 3. 4, I didn't like the monster. The monster made me feel all icky. I just didn't like that. But so yeah, 1 and 4, but 2 and 3 would be my first, then 1 and 4, and then 5.
I'm going to disagree with all of it. I think season 4 was probably my favorite just for the way the characters all interacted with each other and their development in that season. The one thing I didn't like about season 4, it kind of detracted from everything for me, was honestly Elliot's portrayal of the monster. I thought he looked like an emo punk kid the whole time, and it just kind of took away from this horribly powerful monster with no impulse control, and he's like just like a goth kid who sounds like the kid from Saturday Night Live. Even Sookie didn't like him. My least favorite was definitely 5. I feel like they should have ended after 4.
I don't really disagree with Kylie, Karen, and David. Probably what they said, season 1. Well, I guess season 1 was my favorite. I enjoyed the slow build, the learning, the world building as it was, and finding out what's going on, who this beast is, how he ties into the world, finding about the time loops and how they changed little things to try and make it. And one of the things in this timeline was they didn't let her into break bills, and how that all ends up playing and everything, and all the little different changes that they did. Definitely, I think season 3 was my next favorite. I enjoyed the whole quest. It gave a good framework to the entire season. That's what I think a lot of the seasons really after 1 needed more of. They needed a good framework, and that's what I kept looking for in season 5, and they just did not have anything. It was kind of cobbled together. So season 4, I did find I enjoyed more than I thought I would, just based on the end of season 3 and everything. And my initial reaction, I think when Quentin was killed, initially I was like, okay, well, now what are they going to do with his character? I didn't realize he was leaving the show, and then they started the whole emotional, his friends seeing him off and singing the song, and I did feel very emotional about that. I had teared up a bit on it and could watch it again and everything, just to see all the interactions and how he touched all the different characters and how he meant something to all of them. So
I just really want to call back real quick before I ask the next question. Not only do you get that, but you also he gets to go into that room in the underworld where Penny is the shepherd toward the afterlife. And I think that's a lovely little note for that character dynamic, because of course they were the ones that always sniped at each other. You already brought up that Penny hated that he cared, but he's actually showing true, genuine care at that point. Like, you're not such a bad guy, even though all this stuff happened and we had our differences. And I also, one of the unrealized things that I wish they had played more with is the reason why Penny was in that position was because Hades had abdicated when Our Lady Underground, aka Persephone, was, God murdered or whatever they're calling it on the show. And so I felt like that was a really ripe story potential because they kept bringing in all the Greek gods, and I thought all these other Greek gods have all these things. Like Bacchus kept coming back for no apparent reason till the monster killed him. So it's like, why can't you develop this more? And the guy who played Hades was really fun. He kind of reminded me of the Hades in Hadestown, which is a Broadway show. So if we're gonna do that, you might as well just go full on it, if you will. And they never really did. It was very brief. It was 20 minutes of one episode, and then he was never to be seen again. And yeah, it's one of those things that I wish they had played around a little bit more with.
Well, we saw him at the end of a little bit. In season 5, he was in the garage, apartment, whatever it was, mourning Our Lady Underground.
Yeah,
but that was definitely not enough.
Yeah, that's the 20 minutes I'm talking about, where he's playing video games and being depressed. So.
Going back to that Penny and Quentin dynamic when he's kind of shepherding him forward, I really liked their interaction as he's literally walking him to the gateway. And he chuckles when Quentin says, "Can I ask you something?" And he says, "Go ahead, I'm nicer now." And then he has this line about how down here, at first he was just focused on getting back. And then, as time went on, he realized it all just kind of falls away and you get to be who you really are. I think that was one of the underlying things of the show is these characters, they really needed to embrace who they were. And that's when they were at their best, was when they finally found that line. And so to have Penny say it, unfortunately for him, it took him dying to realize that, all that armor doesn't really matter. You just kind of have to get down to who you are at the core.
So, Jeremy kind of answered this question earlier, but this feels like a natural segue. Now that the show is done, it's been done for about a year and a half, almost 2 years, by my reckoning. Would you say that the show will hold up? Was it time for it to go? Would you have watched more seasons, or should it have ended sooner? And why or why not?
I think it should have ended after the 4th season.
Mm-hmm.
But I would not be opposed to a spin-off.
With who?
Dean Fogg and Lipton. I think that would be hilarious and interesting.
I think none of us have touched on how great Dean Fogg was in that whole thing, especially later on when he's just like, of course it's you guys is doing this. Of course you messed it up more. You're my students. Great.
Dean Fogg is one of the underrated characters, and I was so not upset, but in the first season, so as we mentioned before, I have a tattoo that's a bit of a quote from The Magicians, and it's part of Dean Fogg has this speech when they graduate from regular, and it's part of that. And I was so hoping to get part of it because it would have fit the TV character as well, and I didn't get it, and I was upset.
Well, Rick Worthy is just kind of an interesting character anyway. I mean, go U of M, right? But he's been in some really interesting other series. Deep Space Nine, Star Trek, Voyager, Star Trek Enterprise,
he was
Insurrection.
Basically one of those actors they put makeup
Galactica. He played a couple of parts in Supernatural. I've seen him in several things. He's really just an interesting guy. And I thought it was interesting him playing the straight dean and the drunk dean and the high dean. All of the different aspects of Dean Fogg.
Psychotic Dean.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
Psychotic Dean at the end,
He was a protector at one point, but he also just couldn't stand 99% of the student body, and he just wanted them to go away. But no, you couldn't touch them because they were his students, and he was going to fight you come hell or high water.
I think one of my favorite interactions is when he had the spell cast on him that he'd like fade from everyone's memory, and so he's having Todd write his memoirs, and he's just like basically doing everything that he would hold back on and everything. He's just like, I think he just punches a guy out of nowhere, and he's like, "You deserved that," or something like that.
Oh yeah. He punched the husband of one of the wives he slept with because he was a jerk when the affair came to light.
Stuff like that.
He gave a bottle to one of his former colleagues because they like drinking together. You know.
I also like the callback. I also like the callback later on when he finds out he breaks the spell, or Julia breaks the spell, and he's like, "Well, I want my alcohol back. Come on."
Wait, you tell somebody you're leaving and they drink all your alcohol.
They raid your liquor cabinet or something like that.
He had the one bottle taped to the bottom of his thing that nobody knew. like any true alcoholic. Just
pretty fun. It was fun character to explore.
He was. Back to the question that Jeremy was just answering, it could have ended after season 4. If they'd used season 4 as the end, I would have wanted them to like pull a Ned Stark with Game of Thrones and kill him off a couple episodes early so we could get that fallout. But I personally probably would have watched more. It definitely would have faded. We've talked about Supernatural a little bit here and there, but like that's how I felt with Supernatural too. Is like at one point I was just watching because I was a fan. And if the Magicians had gone on, that's what it would have been. I would have just kept watching because of how strongly I felt about the beginning. So it could have ended at 4. I'm glad it ended after 5 so that they don't have many seasons of just jump away through.
I agree with that answer. I think it could have ended after 4 as well, but I'm not mad about it ending after 5. I think not going further was actually the really good decision on their part. Speaking as maybe the lone apologist for Supernatural on this panel, because I love it and I love Jensen. In 15 seasons, you're going to have ups and downs. They had like a second wind, so I think it's possible to get there. But would we have, patiently sat through more seasons of The Magicians to see if they found a second win? I'm glad we didn't have to find out the answer to that question. I was really kind of happy with, they're throwing everything, they're throwing the spaghetti at the wall, and then they're going to create this new land. That sounds nice. This is a good place to stop.
Don't get me wrong. As far as Supernatural goes, I started watching when I was like a junior in high school when it came out, and watched all the way through. For the series finale, I had a Dean Winchester inspired dinner. I got a cherry pie and I had a cheeseburger, and I did the whole thing.
I like you, Dave.
Can't forget a bottle of scotch.
I am 100% pro that concept. That sounded awesome. Cherry pie. Did you have any favorite guest stars, quotes, characters? Beyond your doctor, who was the Blue Fairy.
Oh, Zelda. I loved Zelda as a recurring character. I thought she was very fascinating.
Agreed.
I loved early on, I liked the multiple incarnations of Jane Chatwin that we got, because we saw younger Jane Chatwin and then older Jane Chatwin, who's both trying to shepherd story forward. I thought that was a really good addition, but Zelda stuck out a lot. Later on, she thrived.
I liked Jane's reappearance in the 5th season.
I liked Mayakovsky.
Oh yeah, we've barely mentioned that dude, that irascible.
Even when he became a bear. Even after he got turned into a bear by his wife.
Yes.
Even after he got turned into a bear.
Then.
And then gave himself dementia.
Yeah.
I feel like he was one of those characters that was just himself throughout. He was that steady, same personality throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
Blunt.
My favorite part was when Quentin traveled back in time to his own body to talk to him, and that was one of the best interactions with Mayakovsky.
That is true. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A funny Mayakovsky moment going back to season 1 when they're trying to mind control the little fruit flies, and Quentin's passed out, and he looks at Alice and he just goes, "Do you want me to fail him so you can pass?"
Yeah.
Oh, and the constant references to little foxes. Don't you want to go have fox sex?
Yeah.
He was funny.
One recurring character that I didn't love was the son of Persephone that sexually assaulted Julia, whose name I can't remember, who was played by Mackenzie
Reynard
Nobody
the
liked
Fox.
Reynard.
Reynard the Fox. Yeah,
Yeah.
hated him.
Yeah.
I don't think you were supposed to like him.
You definitely weren't supposed to like him.
I do like how his story ended, where he was just some pizza delivery guy in the middle of nowhere.
I just wish
That
they
was
had
how
got-
they punished him.
Yeah, I just wish they had got to that part sooner. I felt like, he was definitely very scary at first, but then kind of became one of those characters that, okay, either she needs to figure out a way to manifest handling what's happened to her and take care of him, or, we need to find a different story about her processing trauma while being a magician. And I think they tried to do a little bit of both, and they stretched it out over far too long. So then by the time he was the pizza delivery guy, I was like, well, I'm glad he's done.
Yeah, I didn't like how much backstory they gave him with the politician's son and the whole, who was also, born of rape. I didn't. There was too much of his backstory that I didn't want.
Very much, and a waste of a guest star, because the son was played by Chris Gorham, who's been on a lot of different things, including Ugly Betty. He was like her boyfriend for a while, and I think he's a really good actor, but he was very underwhelming in this, and I found that whole story to be very underwhelming. I didn't care about it. It's like, you're not going to be around, so why do I care about this? I knew his ending was coming. It's just a thing.
Yeah, the whole storyline was hard. I mean, it was hard in the beginning. I mean, when the character first showed up as, I can't remember his name right now, as her boyfriend before he was possessed by Reynard.
Oh yeah, he was the therapist guy.
Yeah, he was a nice guy, and it was nice to watch him interact with Alice. But then, the whole Reynard the Fox, it overlapped a whole season and a half, and it just took on a life of its own in the whole underlying terror that Julia was dealing with all the time, and Katie, and both of them just dealing with this. He's out there somewhere, until they finally resolved it in season 3 with the pizza boy. It was just... It lingered way too long during season 2. It should have been when Persephone took him. It would have been nice to see that come to fruition in an episode or two, instead of just lingering out there. Where is he? What's he doing? Who knows? It was hard.
I think they would have been
undercurrent.
Yeah, I think they would have been better served getting rid of him quickly and then just focusing on Julia trying to recover, trying to make herself whole again.
Yeah.
After that incident, I think it would have been a bigger payoff for the show, and you wouldn't have interjected all of this weird stuff to it.
Yeah, I agree.
Me too.
I think that was probably my least favorite storyline, that bit of it, just because of how much Reynard still had to do with everything going forward.
Yeah, I mean, it was just this whole background feeling. And they let it linger so long back there that it was hard. It was very hard to get over.
Absolutely. So, we're going to now go into some of these wrap-up questions for our looking back. Since we're looking back, I'm going to ask the famous creator question. I know I'm going to get a couple people who say, I don't follow creators, but I'm still going to ask it. So, I've already mentioned that Sarah Gamble was the showrunner of Supernatural. This is the thing that she created after that, and then she went on to create You with Greg Berlanti, the Uber producer of all CW things and some Netflix stuff. John McNamara, also a University of Michigan graduate and apparently a co-alumni of a friend of ours, created this show with her, along with a lot of other shows, many of which were canceled in the first or second season. Aquarius probably had the most longevity, but that was still only 2 seasons before The Magicians came along. And this is really the only thing that they work together in the sort of executive producer level, even though they both work together on Aquarius. Would you watch anything else they've created, past, present, or future?
I was a fan of Supernatural before this, so that doesn't really count.
Yeah, I never watched Supernatural because of Sarah. If anything, I followed Eric Kripke, who created Supernatural, to other projects. So.
For sure. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't realize that You was her project. I haven't seen that either, but Yeah, I don't know. As far as the creators go, I'm not sure. I've definitely followed the actors onto other things because I'm a big, once I find an actor that I really like I will seek out other works, but I can't say that I've done so with the producers of this show.
Ditto.
I'm more about what the show is than who created it and everything. If it's
There's
someone
always one,
well
Ben.
known, I might go, oh, well, this has the potential to be good, but I don't know that I'd particularly reach out for something created by them.
Same.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that I liked this one enough. You is on the podcast list, so some people are watching that. I'll probably have to look into that, but not because of the creators, just because people seem to like the show. I'm not convinced by this particular vehicle to want to follow or look back at these other things. Or
You don't want more musical episodes?
look, I like some. You know, like the Buffy one was good. There was a Supernatural
Buffy
musical
was
episode where after Sarah was gone, and that one was fun. You know,
It was fun.
It's the I think it's like you said, it's fun to have a musical episode,
Correct.
but they shoehorned them in all the time.
all the time.
Well, they had a musical number all the way back in season 1 when Quentin is trapped in his own head. They do the Taylor Swift
Oh,
song.
that's-
Penny in.
I forgot
That was-
about that.
And I loved that just because it was the callback to him humming it and Penny being like, dude, stop it.
Yeah, the musical influence was there from the start, but it was sparing, and then it got very heavy-handed.
I felt like that one served its purpose very well because I even forgot that it was even there. Until you brought it up, I was like, oh yeah, that was great.
I just remember listening to Jason Ralph and going, man, he can't sing.
The interludes were okay. If it was one here, one there, okay. The whole episode ones, repeatedly, that's what I struggle with. Exactly.
Yeah,
Quality over quantity, magicians.
Yes, musical episodes, when done right, can be very satisfying. Like you mentioned, the Buffy musical episode that I'm pretty sure to this day I still have memorized.
Me too.
But the magicians, only they could have pulled off having so many, but that doesn't mean that they should have had so.
Correct. Just because you can. Jurassic Park.
Does
Just
not
because you
mean-
can does not mean that you should. Exactly. So Dave, I think, mentioned and Karen mentioned that they'd follow the actors. How about the other two?
I like the actors, but I don't follow actors to different shows usually. I like to discover them on shows.
That's usually how I am too. I go, oh, I know that person from this.
Yeah. IMDb. Wait,
Yes.
I know this person. Where are they from?
Yep.
I'm a combination player when this is concerned. I like to discover faces. I was doing that quite a bit and even in this show. But I do like to follow people. I think the only person that I would really follow, though, from this show is Hale. Because I just find him very winning.
He was a
And
standout for this show.
He was.
He's primarily focused on stage, so there aren't a whole lot of episodes, series that he's on.
It's true.
I mean, I would love to watch him do something else, but
I would, knowing that if I saw like that he was in something, I would go see a production.
I would.
Me too.
Absolutely. I liked Stella Maeve enough
Yes.
and her growth as Julia to watch her do something else. I would watch her do something. I mentioned earlier I have seen Rick Worthy in other series, and I always for some reason, I feel like he was in Arrow.
Maybe.
I think he
As
might have been.
The father, not father, the second husband of Steven's mother, whatever. Yeah, I feel like he was in Arrow early on, but I've seen him in other things. But I don't know that I would track him. But Stella, I enjoyed enough that I would watch her do something else. And Trevor Einhorn is an interesting guy. I might look at something he's done if he was to do to look at something else he's done.
I don't know that Rick Worthy was the person you're thinking of in Arrow.
No.
Because
Okay, maybe not.
Moira, spoiler, although we cover it on our DCTU series, dies pretty early on. And second, she's married to the dad who, dies on the boat. And then she marries John Barrowman's character.
Yeah.
No, so John Barrowman's character fathers her second child,
Right.
but that's not who she married. She does.
She married.
I'm trying to think of the actor's name. I'm actually going to look it up on IMDb, ironically enough, because it is bothering me now. Because when you said that, I was like, oh, he kind of looks like him, but now
He
that I'm
does,
picturing his
and
face,
he talks like him.
yeah, I'm going to find it for you in a second here. Sorry, I don't mean to do this, but these things,
It happens all the time on the podcast.
they stick in my head, and I can't get rid of them.
There's always a Googling, Wikipediaing, IMDBing session, I'm pretty sure.
Anybody else follow actors or not?
Like I said, I would follow Hale. I do follow actors generally. If there's somebody in something that I really, really love, I will say, regardless of what the show is, I think I'll watch it. And there has been some very random shows that I've watched just because there's somebody I've liked in it. I don't know that anybody in here particularly would draw me like that, except for Hale, because I have a special place in my heart for him, really.
Mm-hmm.
So just to throw, the actor who played Walter Steele, who was Moira's second husband, is Colin Salmon, who also did Resident Evil and Alien vs. Predator.
Got it.
He's more movies, whereas Rick Worthy's popped up in a lot of popular shows.
Rick Worthy was in Supernatural as the alpha vampire.
Yep.
Yes,
And
that is true.
He was Simon
That's
in Battlestar Galactica. If anyone's seen that, he was one of the Cylons.
That's on
Gotcha.
my years-long list. I still haven't watched BS.
He has a
It
huge
is one of my
list.
all-time favorites. It is one of
Absolutely
my
huge
all-time
list. He's a
favorites.
fabulous actor.
He is. He really is.
But yes, I would watch Hale Appleman do almost anything.
Al Appleman was the stand, and it's funny because I remember when the show was coming out, Jason Ralph was the name attached, and while I did love Quentin, he definitely was not the character that consistently shined through. It was definitely Elliot and Julia, to me, along with were the big ones, and then Margot grew so much, and Todd and all of these other characters were really so well performed.
Here's a trivia question for you guys. Who is Jason Roth married to?
I knew this, but now
Rachel Brosnahan from
That sounds
The Marvelous Mrs.
Yes.
Maisel.
Oh,
he's
They're
appeared on the
married.
show too.
interesting. It is a good show.
Oh, that's a fabulous show.
So now, I must ask you what I deem to be the $1 million question, but don't ask me for $1 million. We're not that kind of podcast. We feel a certain responsibility to our listeners because we, style ourselves as the TV experts, if you will. We watch a lot of TV around here. And we feel a certain sense of responsibility to our listeners, especially when we're looking back. So the question here, gentle panel, is would you recommend The Magicians to others? Why or why not?
I would. If somebody was into shows like Supernatural and were also possibly Harry Potter fans, I think they would very much like The Magicians. It seems like the perfect marriage between those two. So I would absolutely recommend it. I would tell them, watch it, tell me what you think.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I have recommended The Magicians to a lot of people, and I describe it that similar kind of way. I describe it as, if Harry Potter was a kid that grew up in New York, this is probably what he'd be like. And when I recommend it to people and I'm not sure what their taste in shows are, I say, watch season 1, tell me how you feel about it, and if you don't love it, don't go forward. If you did, it's worth the watch.
I have recommended it, will continue to recommend it. I love the show, love the book. I usually recommend the book more than the show, though.
Yeah,
I have the book on order.
it's so good.
I have to reread the book now after rewatching the seasons and everything. But I if I knew what the person liked, I'd probably recommend it if I knew they were going to actually enjoy it. I don't think it's one that I would just go out of my way to be like, oh, you haven't seen this season or this show? Definitely watch it. Definitely worth a watch. I would say first season is definitely worth a watch I liked the build and the framework it had there. If you definitely stick with it or enjoy it, stick with it at least till season 4, and then maybe sparingly watch season 5 and an episode here or there, and not try and binge it like I did, where I stopped caring and played it at 1.5 speed just to get it done. So
Oh, hashtag harsh. Ben got harsh.
Harsh!
As for me, this is the very definition of a cult show. I can't imagine that this has general viewership appreciation potential just because it's very, very mired in its genre. So if you are a fantasy fan, I like the idea of crossing supernatural with Harry Potter. I think that's pretty fair. It actually also kind of reminded me of something else, but now I just lost it with all of the sort of the math and there was a little bit of like a Da Vinci Code piece. What? Who?
Numbers.
I never watched that show.
They were math heavy on that show.
Okay. I'll take your word for it. I mean, it's in the name, but I'll take your word for it. But I can't see this going, I can't see me saying watch this to anybody who doesn't already love fantasy of some type. Mm-hmm. And even then, what I've been describing it as, this is what the CW could do if it could swear, basically, is what the show is.
The funny thing about that, the first season, when it aired, was censored. So they still said the F word, but it was just open air. And I thought, when I was watching it, I was like, are they doing that on purpose? And I wound up buying the season. Oh, they're swearing. They just cut that out because they couldn't say it.
Right. And not just swearing, Margot uses the C word quite a bit, for example. So.
Oh, yeah.
Much more adult language, much more, I think, adult situations, even though it's essentially, young adults, late teens, early 20s type characters. But it does have a very CW-esque feel because, there's a lot of sleeping with people, this person sleeping with this person sleeping. I mean, there's a threesome.
Everybody's sleeping together.
There's a lot of pretty people hooking up with each other.
Pretty much, yeah.
Actually transmitted lycanthropy.
Yeah, sure.
Yep, transmitting lycanthropy, of course. So all that stuff. But I think, if that appeals to you, then you will probably find something to like, and definitely at least give the first season a try. I cannot make guarantees on the remaining 4. I think you've heard that. There's a mixed reaction to them. And I think it's really just how along for the story you are in season 1 as to whether or not the rest of it makes any sense to you. But it would be a very limited recommendation. And quite frankly, I probably know most of the people. No, I can think of some people who would probably still watch this and like it. That has not on the panel, but, is out there.
And like Jeremy said, the books as a recommendation is a really good place to go if you know someone that likes to read. I've read the books multiple times, and then I actually, gearing up for this before I started my rewatch, I listened to the books on audiobook because I work from home. And so I listened to them all in preparation for the show so I could remind myself what memories are show and what memories are book. And here to draw that.
Is there a good audiobook narrator?
I really enjoy the audiobook narrator. Audiobooks are newer for me. I listened to a lot of them this year, but it's still kind of a newer thing for me because I've never had a situation where I was able to listen to a lot of the last
Oh, talk to me. I have lots of audiobook favorites. I'm happy to share.
But yeah, no, they were definitely, the narrator didn't detract from the story at all. Like, he didn't detract. He wasn't something that was a problem.
That's good.
So, yeah. At worst, he's just there. Some people, I'm sure, really liked him. I can't say I had strong feelings towards him, but he didn't take anything away from the story.
Okay, the pinnacle of audiobook authors is Jim Dale doing Harry Potter.
Oh, I love Jim Dale.
That is, like, the ultimate audiobook narrator. But, yeah, anything that doesn't detract from the story is good. And it's always good if they add to it.
The Harry Potter audiobooks were ruined for me. I had a college roommate who would play them every time when he would go to sleep, but he would fall asleep quickly and I would continue listening, so I would hear it over and over and over. So, and he'd get like I don't know, a little bit ahead from where he was. So
that's rough. That'll do anybody.
maybe that's why I don't really do audiobooks now. So
that's too bad. It's a great way to pass drive time.
I do podcasts for that, so.
Yeah, that whole world is, like, podcasts, audiobooks, and all of that are very new to my listening. So I started working from home about a year ago now, and that's when I really started. Audiobooks, podcasts, pretty much all day, every day.
Text me if you want new recommendations.
I will take you up on that.
Okay.
Well, given that we've transitioned to audiobooks and podcasts, at this time what I'd like to do is ask, is there anything else that you would like to say that we haven't already covered looking back at The Magicians?
I do have one thing I wanted to bring up, and it was about one of the episodes we didn't really touch on. It was, I think, in season 3, when they were breaking into the library underworld and that whole thing with the different characters' perspectives, and you had Harriet's, and the whole thing was silent and in sign language until that very end portion where the mirror broke and it was such a jarring sound. I thought that was very well done just as a production standpoint of it. So it definitely, the show, we've had it has its ups and downs. It does definitely have some gems in it. So,
and yet I agree,
really
that was really well directed, but it also reminded me of Hush from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. There was a lot of, I think Sarah must be a Buffy fan, because there was a lot of Buffy references or parallels or things that just reminded me of the show. Musical episodes notwithstanding.
I
that
never
was a
watched
phenomenal
Buffy,
episode.
so
I highly recommend Buffy. Two
I
thumbs
have
up.
heard.
I do
I've
too.
heard. I've never gotten around to it, so.
Ben, you now have homework. Proceed.
Buffy is one of my all-time favorites.
Me too. It's definitely in my top 3. Sometimes I say it's my favorite. It just depends on the day.
I was weird. I got into Buffy. I kind of fell backwards into it because I started watching Angel, not realizing it was a spinoff. And then I fell backwards into Buffy and absolutely loved it.
That is worth a discussion for offline, because I want to know what that experience was like, given what we know Angel to be versus what Buffy was.
Yes. Very different.
Very different.
I'm trying to think. I feel like we've touched on most of the big things for The Magicians. There are a lot of episodes and arcs that really stand out. It's kind of funny. We've all mentioned season 1 being one of the stronger seasons, but didn't really delve too much into it. Personally, I think that's kind of just because it's so interconnected that it's hard to talk about one thing from that season. And it's really because that's the one they draw most from the books. That one follows pretty well. Like, the characters are aged up and there are a few other things they tweak here and there, but by and large, it's very stuck to. So for as well regarded as it is, it's not one that's really easy to talk about.
I agree.
How do you guys feel about Poppy?
I
Remind
love
me.
the actress.
I love the actress too, so.
I love the actress. She's so
It was
funny.
so much fun watching
Whenever-
her show up in this season, or in this series.
Whenever she pops up, it's so, because she does seem to, she's a very, genre-specific actor. She pops up in everything that's this kind of
Felicia
genre.
Day. I was
Yes.
like, which one was Poppy again? It was Felicia Day. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Felicia Day. Yep.
She seems to pop up in everything, and her character was so fun. The egg episode.
The eggs.
Yes.
Isn't that
And
hilarious?
When they all have to cuddle the eggs after the fact.
Holding eggs to their heads. Egg
And then-
hangover.
And then Penny saves his because that's what he throws into the fire after Quentin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
That was a funny episode.
It was funny. She's a funny gal. I love watching her show up. She shows up in various series, and she's just a hoot to watch, but she totally disrupts the storyline.
She's delightful. I love Felicia Day, and it was fun to see her. And I mean, she's immediately recognizable. Probably my favorite guest star on this show, to be honest, just because even though Poppy as a character was inconsequential, really in the end, just the energy she brought was fun.
Yeah. She is so energetic and so much fun to watch. I was just
It's-
kind of going through my notes, looking at it. Was there anything else we didn't cover? But yeah, that's
It's funny
pretty much
because
it.
her book counterpart is a large part of the story.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they blend elements of her story into Margot's arc later on, as far as the Josh connection goes. But she has a large role in the book series, and they made her just kind of this smaller character for the show because they needed to give their core room to grow and breathe, because Margot, whose name is Janet in the book, which they make several jokes about throughout the series. That's why when in season 4 when they have the alternate personality, or when they like have their memories wiped. She's Janet then, and she's referenced as Janet. The first time we meet Zelda, she calls her Janet. It's Margot this time. It's a callback to that.
Forgot about that.
Oh, fun.
So she's much less, she's still important, but she has much less, obviously it's book, not screen, but screen time, if you will. Like, she's a more behind the scenes character where you get summarized what's been going on with her.
I can't wait to read the books now. I'm super excited.
They're very good. I highly recommend them.
Books are always good.
Anything else about the TV show, The Magicians? Hearing none, a pregnant pause if nothing else, I think we've officially, thoroughly, and completely looked back at The Magicians. Would you agree?
I would.
All right. Awesome. Well, at this point, because we've so thoroughly and completely looked back at The Magicians, what I'd like to do is thank Karen and Ben and Jeremy and Dave for joining me to do so, to look back at The Magicians. And because we've done that, it is now time to roll the credits. Couch Potatoes Unite! Exclamation point was produced by Back Pocket Productions, run by yours truly, the Chief Couch Potato, which is really another way of saying executively produced by me, Kylie Piette. My associate producers are Krista Pennington and Selene Rezmer. I edit this podcast, and our logo is by Rebecca Wallace. Our marketing graphic artist is Krista. Our theme song was written by Sarah Milbratz and sung by Sarah, Amy McDaniel, and Kels Rezmer. Kels played the keyboard, Ian McDonough played the bass, Christian Somerville played the guitar, and the whole shebang was engineered by Kyle Aspinall and Christian. We hail from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Please, if you like what you hear, take the time to rate us, give us stars, provide comments, or review us wherever you get your podcasts. Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, CastBox, and Amazon are just a few of the places you can find us, but we're also on YouTube. We have our website. Otherwise, feel free to tell us how we're doing, what we should add, subtract, keep, or toss. You know how it goes. And if you have suggestions for shows we might consider, contact us at our website where we have a guest book, by email at couchpotatoesunitepodcast@gmail.com, our Facebook, our Twitter at CPU Podcast, our Instagram at Couch Potatoes Unite, or wherever you get your podcasts. Though, of course, we add new and old shows to chat about around the water cooler all the time, and always have new episodes coming down the pipe. Just listen to our intros. If you miss old episodes or want to know in general what shows we cover, just search for us. Find us wherever you do searchable things on the internet. Don't forget that exclamation point, or contact us via our website, our email, our social media accounts, and stay up on all the new events and episodes by our humble little podcast, Couch Potatoes Unite! Exclamation point. Until the next time, The Magicians is available to stream on Netflix. If you have nominations for shows we should cover on our podcast, contact us via social media or email. You can volunteer to be a panelist yourself. In the meantime, and until next time, until next episode, new episodes are published every Wednesday. Keep listening, keep watching, stay tuned.
Bye.
Comfortable.